Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have breaking news coming out of Russia that Russia is having a very rough start to their polling day here when election day has begun, and the election centers across Russia are being torched, attacked, and also vandalized, all at the same time Russians are trying to quote-unquote vote in a fair and free election, quote-unquote. We're also learning that there's another attack on a major Russian oil refinery inside of Russian territory by the Ukrainians, and also the Freedom of Russia Legion is still plowing their way through Belgrad and making their way further into Russian territory. So with that, let's go ahead and jump right into our first article of the day, which is from Visegrad 24. And in this post we can see the Russian police are arresting a man at a polling station who said he will vote for anyone but Putin. And of course, this year's Russian presidential election really is something else. So let's take a look at this video and see what we have here. So as you can see, there's the Russian police with a Russian citizen on the ground. They're wrestling him down because he dared to vote for someone other than Putin in this free and fair election, of course. And there they are, roughing him up a bit and carrying him out. And it looks like maybe that's the police officer's gun he grabbed or someone's gun, but they're also taking that away as well. But man, you don't vote for anyone but Putin in this election. This is a different type of election than we're used to, where you can't vote for anyone that you really want to vote for. But anyways, with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to the Kyiv Post. And we see in Russia, ballot boxes are being set on fire en masse and doused with bright green paint, and the electoral process is being disrupted in so many different various ways, and such incidents have already been recorded in Moscow and St. Petersburg, as well as in smaller towns. And that is true. People are setting polling booths on fire, they're dumping ink and paint into the polling boxes themselves, and there's so many incidents, there's really no way to show every single one on this video itself. So we're going to show one of them here of a woman throwing ink down one of the ballot boxes. As you can see right there, she just destroyed the entire box there full of ballots, and now the Russian police are grabbing her and taking her into custody. So that is about the only way to take care of these ballots, is to basically destroy them because they are worthless. And with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which also goes to Visegrad 24. And not only are the Russian citizens getting involved in trying to make their voices heard on election day by destroying the polling places, the Ukrainians are also upset as well, and they've launched artillery strikes and drone attacks on these polling centers as well that are close to the Ukrainian border. So let's take a look and see what we have in this one. So as you can hear, they are raining down the fire and fury on these polling stations, and they are not going to let these loyal Russians to Putin go in and cast their ballot in peace. They're going to feel the wrath of their choice at the ballot box. So when you vote for Putin, you're voting for chaos, and you're also voting for a dictator. And in this case, the voters are feeling that firsthand. So that's probably the best way to let them know that choices do have an effect. So we see that there. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Osint Yuri. And we can see here there are unconfirmed reports of a bomb exploding in a fire at another polling station in Moscow. And it says right here that there was a large explosion at this building here where the voting is taking place. So let's also take a look at this one. So as you can hear, there was a explosion or a bomb going off of some sort in this polling center, and now there is a major fire protruding from the exterior of the building. So once again, the Russians are having a very hard time putting in their votes. But with that, we're moving on to our next piece of news here, which also goes to us on Twitter, and it's the Enforcer, and be sure to follow us over there. It says, Russian voters in Kursk and Rostov-on-Don have found out that official pens that are handed out in polling stations contain magic ink, and applying heat even for a fraction of a second makes the ink invisible so that votes can be changed at a later moment. And if only the Russians could get this ingenious in actually fighting a war, they might be able to make some progress. But in this case, the Russians are putting their intellect, if you can say that, toward making their way toward basically election interference in their own election. But if anyone needed any more proof that the elections in Russia are indeed rigged, I'm not sure how much closer you can get to proof than this. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Visegrad 24. And we've seen in the past 2 days alone that over 12% of Russia's total oil refining capabilities have been knocked offline. And just last night, yet another major oil refinery was knocked out of action. And we can see here that a Ukrainian drone strike has destroyed the Kaluga oil refinery southwest of Moscow. And Ukraine continues its new strategic campaign to systematically destroy Russia's oil and gas industry. And Ukraine has launched plenty of sanctions over the past 3 to 4 weeks. And I don't think I could have come up with a better way to enforce sanctions myself. And Ukraine is taking their enforcement right to the source itself and destroying these oil refineries. And this is eventually going to become a real serious and major problem for Russia, because if Ukraine does keep taking these facilities out, which there appears to be no resistance to doing so, Russia is going to have a serious problem on their hands when it comes to getting oil, because right now they rely on their refineries quite heavily, and Ukraine is knocking them out at a record pace, even faster than I expected, which is probably going to cause Putin to panic much quicker than we had previously thought. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Insider Paper, and we're seeing that Putin is vowing a response to Ukrainian attacks on Russia, and who the hell knows what Putin is threatening this time. He threatens something pretty much every other day at this point. His new favorite is back to the nuclear threat, and at this point, I'm not sure what he can really do to even respond to Ukrainian attacks on Russia. Because presumably Putin should have defenses in these regions where Ukraine is attacking, but he doesn't even have defenses there, so the response seems to be pretty muted if you ask me. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to Azov South, and we see the convoy of the Legion of Freedom of Russia Legion moving through the territory of Russia, and of course, strictly according to plan. So let's take a look at this video right here. And we can see there's that long line of convoy of Freedom of Russia Legion soldiers and tanks, and they are literally just driving straight through the territory of Russia with no resistance whatsoever in the Belgrad region. And this is quite alarming. If I was the Russians, I'd be quite freaked out by now, because nothing is stopping these guys. And it doesn't appear they have any plan in place to actually stop them in the future either. So do you think these guys are going to have more success than the Wagner forces did back when they did that coup about 6 months to a year ago? Or do you think they're going to get snuffed out in a couple of weeks? Let me know down in the comments below, because I'm really curious what y'all's opinion is on it, because I feel like these guys are going to get pretty far into Russia before they meet any real resistance. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which also goes to Nexta, and we can see a missile alert has been declared in Belgrad for the 4th time in a day, and the sounds of explosions can be heard in the city. So let's take a listen and see what kind of chaos is going on in this Belgrad region. So you can hear the explosions in the distance. Quite a bit of gunfire too. And I'm telling you what, those guys are absolutely hammering the Russians right now. The few forces that are there to defend their territory are getting absolutely hammered by the Freedom of Russia Legion, and this is not going to go in Russia's way. I can pretty much tell you that and guarantee that right now. At least in Belgrad, this is about to be an absolute victory for the Free Russian forces. So with that, we're moving on to yet our next post here, which goes to Null Reports. And we can see that the Freedom of Russia Legion has not only made their way through Belgrad, but now they've destroyed one of Russia's coveted Murom P surveillance complexes and the antennas, which are also used for electronic warfare means. And they took that out with a drone attack, by the way, so the Russians are now blind in that region, at least when it comes to this Murom P surveillance complex, and they can no longer conduct electronic warfare because it has been destroyed. So not only is the Freedom of Russia Legion plowing their way through, they're also taking out some vital infrastructure as well that the Russians are using to fight their war against Ukraine. And finally, moving on to our last post of the day, we actually have another one from us at the Enforcer on Twitter, and here we can see a video evidence of the Russian military equipment being kept inside the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and this comes right after Russia refused to relinquish control of the plant to the IAEA over security concerns. And there's probably nothing more dangerous than letting Russians near a nuclear power plant whatsoever, because look what they did with Chernobyl when the USSR was in charge of that. So let's take a look at this video here and see what we have inside of the reactor building, or one of the buildings at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, with the Russians storing their equipment there. As you can see, the guys up here appear to be using the top of the area up here as a running track, and there are those military equipment right down there at the bottom. They are storing all their trucks right inside the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and using that as a nuclear shield, because they know Ukraine is not going to target that building right there. And that's all there is to the video, but as you can see, it's quite deplorable that Russia would resort to actually using a nuclear power facility as a shield against Ukrainian attacks, because if that building is ever accidentally hit, then that could be quite bad indeed, because it could cause a nuclear disaster and potentially even a meltdown. But with that is actually our last piece of news for the day. And I hope you found this video informative, and if you have, please press the like button and give us a subscribe as well for more daily war updates. And also, you can go sign up on our Patreon page. The link is in the description below if you want to help support our operation financially also, which is a major help. And be sure to join us tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern for our nightly war news stream. And of course, bye-bye for now.